Chapter 1.11 Cluster Administration. Summary. The overview helps those managing or creating Kubernetes clusters, emphasizing familiarity with core concepts. Guides on planning and setting up clusters are available, and choosing the right distro is crucial based on needs like on-premise, cloud, or trying a multi-node setup. Managing a cluster involves tasks such as node management, cluster autoscaling, and resource quota setup. Familiarity with essential components and how to handle these tasks is important. Additionally, developers actively working on Kubernetes should select a well-maintained distro for more development control. Security in Kubernetes requires understanding certificate generation, API access control, authentication, and authorization. SYSCTLs manage kernel parameters, auditing logs play a role in security, and communication between control planes node requires attention. Optional services like DNS integration enhance functionality. Cluster administration. This overview is for those setting up or managing Kubernetes clusters, expecting some basic understanding of Kubernetes concepts. Planning a cluster. The guides in the setup section provide examples for planning and configuring Kubernetes clusters using distributions, known as distros. Some distros may not be actively maintained, so choose those compatible with recent Kubernetes versions. Decide if you want to test Kubernetes locally or create a high-availability, multi-node cluster. Choose a distro that suits your needs. Consider whether you will use a hosted Kubernetes service, like Google Kubernetes Engine, or manage your own cluster. Determine if it will be on-premises or a cloud-based solution, IaaS. Kubernetes doesn't directly support hybrid clusters, but you can use multiple separate clusters instead. For on-premises configurations, choose an appropriate networking model. Decide between using bare metal hardware or virtual machines, VMs. Determine if you'll run a standard cluster or actively develop Kubernetes code. An actively maintained distro is better for development work. Some distros provide binary releases for more options. Understand cluster components before proceeding. Managing a cluster. Learn to manage nodes, understand cluster autoscaling, and set up resource quotas in shared clusters. Master node management, autoscaling, and resource quota setup for shared clusters. Securing a cluster. Generate certificates guides the creation of digital certificates using various tools. Kubernetes Container Environment outlines the container management on a Kubernetes node. Controlling access to the Kubernetes API covers the implementation of API access control. Authenticating details authentication processes and options in Kubernetes. Optional cluster services. DNS integration details mapping DNS names to Kubernetes services, while logging and monitoring cluster activity covers Kubernetes logging and its implementation.